Hello and welcome to this informative international webinar on a topic that not only timely, crucial, but for a global community, global agenda for reduced inequality, SDG-10, and its significance in elevating discrimination against minorities. I'm Heman, Senior Research Associate at South Asia Research Institute for Minorities, and I'm thrilled to be the host of your webinar today. The webinar aims to explore the profound implication of this global agenda, particularly its impact on alleviating discrimination faced by minority communities. We will navigate through the SDG-10, examining how it serves as a powerful tool in fostering social equality and justice. Our distinguished panel will share their insights and shed light on the role of SDG-10 in promoting inclusivity and combating discrimination against minorities. Let me give a quick overview of existence of SARIM. The South Asia Research Institute for Minorities is an organization dedicated to championing the rights of minority communities in South Asia. Our team, consisting of researchers, field experts, and passionate advocates, actively works to raise awareness about the challenges faced by minority communities in the region through initiatives such as updated database, annual reports, and international conferences, interviews, and such discussion and webinars. SARM is committed to fostering constructive dialogue, collaboration. Our vision is to be a leading voice for minority rights in South Asia, striving for a world where everyone, regardless of their ethnicity, religion, culture, or anything, enjoys equal rights and opportunities. Join us as we dwell into this discussion and seek meaningful pathway towards a more equitable world. Moving ahead, we have fantastic lineup of speaker. Let me give you a quick overview of them. Cynthia Stephen, Dr. Tapan Mohanty, and Abhay Kumar. Let's give this webinar a rolling. First up, we have the Dr. Tapan Mohanty, the Dean of the Distance Education Department, Center, and Professor of Sociology of Law. Dr. Monty's extensive work spans areas like globalization, tribal development, and the culture of consumption. He has made significant contribution to understanding the dimensions for marginalized communities in Madhya Pradesh and beyond. Dr. Mohanty, with over 60 research articles published in the journals and having worked on diverse projects, including issues of tribal development, your expertise bring a wealth of knowledge to our discussion today. We are eager to hear your insights on how SDG-10 interacts with the plight of marginalized communities, particularly in the context of your extensive research. Dr. Thapan, the virtual stage is all yours. We are excited to hear your thoughts. Over to you.
Thank you, Heman and Sarin, for providing me this opportunity, though it comes at a very short notice. But since I have worked in this area, and it's a very important area to discuss, I agreed to share my views. If you don't call expertise, but my views, what we talk about the SDG-10 goal, and looking at the dealing with the inequality, which is sometimes look pervasive among the minorities. And this is so, when you look at inequality has been a very, very common standard in across societies, across civilizations, and over a period of time. And in fact, it was Karl Marx when he talked about this type of economic inequality, and he talked about it because class divisions. There are people who have access to property and people who do not have access to property, and therefore they belong to two different categories. So it was economic classification, but we now talk about it's not just about always economic. It's about social exclusion. It's about also social inequality. And when you look at social inequality, you talk about the purchasing power, the capability of economically to share, then the type of status they have in society, and the discrimination that is heaped upon them people because in terms of their access to education, access to employment, and the defined role in workplace also. Now we could talk about, for example, we talk about now sexual harassment at workplaces and so on. We look at different type of work conditions. And even if you're working in employment, for example, if I'm in South Asian and working in America, even in a multinational company like about, say, Tesla, and then people look at me, look, these are Asian, these are Indian. And even if you are a higher position, but your race becomes an important factor. Similarly, language, for example, in Pakistan, dominant language, talk about minorities. Talk a dominant language is Urdu. Now, somebody who speaks, for example, in Bengali, like that is why the Pakistan's section from Bangladesh happened, because it was the religion was not a problem. Because normally what you see at terms of minority, look at religions, but look at the division of Pakistan, Bangladesh. It was not about religion; it's about language. So there is ethnicity, there are linguistic minorities, then the religious minorities, and then there are cultural practices that distinguishes one section from other. For example, even like we call about Ahmadiyyas, another sect. So even within the sect about. So therefore, when you talk about a broadly concept of minority, it depends upon who to concept who are the minority and where do they exist and which societies they are from. So therefore, we need to look at in a broader spectrum to say who constitute a minority. For example, Kashmir in India, the Jammu and Kashmir states we have in a Kashmir largely is the Muslim dominated area, but yet the Hindus are the minorities. If you look at Arunachal Pradesh, Meghalaya, the Christian dominated state, but where Hindus are minority. But broadly, in the Hindus constitute to 70% of the population in India. So they are in broad spectrum, they're majority. So when you look at the majority and minority syndrome, it look about whether we can be specific to a region, whether we can be specific to a particular country, but broadly one is say instead of district, state, we take internationally the parameters are the nation state. So look at the nation state, who are the minorities? No, they are minorities. The Jews are minorities. One point they decided we have a state called Israel, so they're minorities. The Palestine talk about look, we have dominated in our own land, so we are a minority here. So when you look at these questions, and anyone can be a minority at any point of time in that sense. So, whether if I am in Hindu, if I'm majority in India, I am a majority. But when I go to a Muslim territory, for example, Mohalla in Muslim area, so I act as minorities, and the people I have to practice them. For example, even if I go to a Mazar, if I am going to say like Ajmer Sharif Dargah, so I have to accept the practices what is prevalent among the minorities. Not as a Hindu, I can push my way through there. So therefore, this is one issue. But second issue, what actually Marx perceived that many a times, many of our problems of discrimination starts from economic problem and religion problem. So therefore, when you think about inclusivity, when you look at it, and therefore, this discrimination leads to an injustice. So we like employment. So I said, look, I am not, for example, if I'm a Hindu who is in a bakery, I said I would not employ any Muslims or any Sikh or any Jains, or for example, or a Christian there. Now, when you do that, you first practice them as a religious minority, then disentitle them from economic activities, and then they continues to develop a herd mentalities and a minority syndrome envelops among them. So they perceive the notion of what I call sociologically the distinction between we and they. And that problem affects many well. And so, and in a multicultural country, it is more and more often. So whether it is America, where people distinguish themselves, look, these are Latinos, these are Asian, these are Chinese, and then they are the Italians, so there are Italian enclave, right? So this is a ghetto mentality starts from. And in fact, I would say a very interesting case even in the United States of America. I'm saying it so because I'm not looking only at religion, looking at education. For example, many years ago, it's in the 1950s, prior to that, there is a case called Brown versus Board of Education, which said that these blacks would have in areas that are black dominated, they have a different school than the white dominated. Whites cannot go to the black schools, blacks cannot go to the white schools. Now, and then we talk about inequality. So so the US Supreme Court changed it. It said no, it is actually patently discriminatory. Even if I'm a white rich man, I stay near a black dominated area. So if I have a right to send my kid to a black dominated school, not because it's a black dominated, but because my child deserves the right to where, and I also deserve the right to where I want to be taught. Right. Similarly, in South Africa, before this, Minister Mandela took over as president, among the Buddhas, there was the reason. That's why you find there are the black beaches and white beaches. The beaches for which are only black people can go, and beaches which are only white people can go. And that's racial discrimination. So when you look at such type of discriminations, and remember, in such a situation, the minorities were whites only, but they have a dominance over the blacks. In Zimbabwe, things are happening in the reverse now. If you look at from South Africa to Zimbabwe, you find the reverse is happening, where the minorities which are whites, their farms, their fields are taken over many times by the majority of blacks. So that is why when I look at minority and majority, it has economic dimension, it has social dimensions, it has cultural dimensions, and practices. In India, for example, Muslims, the Bora Muslims, so many among the Shia Sunni dissect, you don't find where a Bora is placed. No, so therefore, even if within a religion, there are discriminations. And in Pakistan, you find those people who have moved from India, the religions are the same, but they are called even now today as Muhajirs. So the Christians are minority in Pakistan. So we have to look into the different. South Asia as provides even the Sri Lankan crisis. Many years ago, the Tamil problems. It was ethnic conflict. It was a question of minority versus majority. So and it's a global problem. Therefore, I'm very happy that the SDG goal 10 talk about because the global problems need to a global solution. You need to have a convergence of the things. Unless until we converge it, take a uniform set of standard values, and then look at it to deal with. Because we understand that if you look at development, if you look at society, a complete holistic development, then we cannot practice this sort of exclusivity, this sort of injustice, this sort of discrimination. And for that reason, we must give a lot of credit to the UDHR, or United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. Because being as a human, we have to understand what are the human rights and what are the human values. And interestingly, these human values are universal. Of course, there are the concept of relativity versus universality in a broader discipline of international human rights, where many Africans, even Muslims, use just that, look, female circumcision is a cultural practice, and therefore you cannot impose human rights on that. No, those are again longer debates. So it has to be understood, because whether such practices are discriminatory, and if they are so how do you deal with that? Whether and that is why we talk about the economic inequality, social inequality, and so. I'm happy to state that in the context of India, when we have talked about, because since I'm from India, India, Pakistan, South Asia, these are common realities. So I would share the which provides, if equality is injustice, is the aim of a society, then where do we stand? Where do we begin from? And one such a beginning point is, of course, the question of law. So I am not sure, people call economic benefits, like reservations we have. These are certain gains. I think what is imperative that you talk about, in a sense, is that existence of a law is a legal framework, because everybody comes under the law. So if you want to look at a legal system, so which is the best law, which is the dominant law? And for us, and for many countries, many democratic countries, the only distinction that they have if they have a constitution. So it is our constitution which is called the law, it is the supreme law of the land. And our constitution guarantees certain rights, whether they are fundamental rights, whether they are constitutional rights, whether they are legal rights. And these are hierarchized. So if I have what is in jurisprudence called the ground norm, our ground norm starts from the constitution. And what do we start with the constitution? We start with the constitution, these certain rights which are given to people, and one is Article 14, which is called right to equality. Now it states that you have to be any citizen, any individual, is equal before the eyes of the law, and therefore whether he is a minority or majority, this question doesn't arise at all. Second, equal protection before law. So if I am going to the court, if I have a problem, my law says whether I'm a majority Hindu or a minority Jain or a minority Christian or a minority Buddhist or a minority Jew. So it doesn't distinguish us between both of us. So what it talks about is generally, it says, look, what it actually says my access to law, or my access to legal system is guaranteed under the situation and the provision that it guarantees me qualities. Right. So these are issues we need to look at it, in that perspective. Secondly, thirdly, when you look at this right, fundamental rights, equality, freedom, then there's freedom. What is freedom again? There are a lot of questions, sharp questions about freedom, freedom of expression. What constitutes the freedom of expression? Now, in fact, that I could take many seminars on the whole idea of freedom of expression. Now, America is talk about right, what is actual expressions. For example, if you look at this cartoon that happened, Danish paper called Politiken, it created controversy across Denmark, across Europe, across the world. That is, and they're similar with the French, the Jesuit. No, you talk about which is we are expressing as a freedom of expression. Now, but broadly, people think of freedom of expression about your writing, about your poetry, about your painting. Now, you need, whether you're a minority or majority, you have a right to express yourself. So those are either, if you practice that only majority can do so, minority cannot do so, that discrimination is problem that will lead to injustices. And therefore, wherever there is injustice, what are discriminations, wherever the injustice, inequality, then that cannot be developed. That cannot be empowered. And today, with all these situations happen, and what many years the Prime Minister Manmohan Singh was talked about, that if you think about the resources of the country, our minorities have first access to the resources, because in fact it is very common in a Gujarat doctrine, also in international law, international public relations, we used to say that if India is a big brother in South Asia, then we have to be compromising with the other smaller nations, because we don't have as a big brother, you should have a big heart. No? That is how it is called confidence building measures. So similarly, if you look at minorities are there, and if they have access to our resources, first is access to resources, then there will be filling up sentiment. They will be thinking, okay, we are taken equally. Sometimes you have to be more equal than others. No, that is one idea we talk about, because it's not about just creating spaces. You may create spaces, and that is why I said there's a distinction between equality and equity, and probably both can come when you develop a framework of rule of law. Now, the government of India has started many schemes. Example, like skill development. There is a minority development fund, National Minority Development Fund, which provides funding for minorities, and we have, of course, National Minority Commission. That if there are discrimination against them, we have to look at it, and they develop entrepreneurship abilities among them. Now there is a focus on skill development across this country. So we think if there is skill development, now how do we look at the skill development minorities? Many minorities actually practices many trades. I was working in Madhya Pradesh for my doctoral dissertation. Interesting, I was working on textiles. So I was trying to look at in South Asia. Many women have their what is called choices of the saris, and there are different type of saris which are very famous in different parts of India. For example, if you go to Bengal, there are Kanta saris. If you go to Rajasthan, there are Kota saris. If you go to South, there are Kanchipuram, Dharmapuram. If you go to Banaras, there are Banaras silk saris. So they're different. If you go to Gujarat, so there are different designs and saris. You go to Odisha, they have different sari patterns. So one among them was this Chandari silk product. And when I worked among them, then I found that the majority of the dominant people who are into business of the sari are Hindus, and especially the Jains. They are Jains. But who are the workers there? Many of the workers are actually either they are Muslims or they are the Dalits. So they are either called Olis or they are called Momins or Ansaris. So many of them happen to be the caste belong to the Ansaris. So in a sense, as if she the business which is thriving at the one end, there are these moments, or these are Ansaris who are Kolis, who are scheduled caste, or who are the marginalized Muslim communities working. And then for whom? And then the traders are the Jains. And in I talk about in business, it is not about caste or communities. It's about sustainability, about existence. So in a sense, why I am saying this particular, because skills. The Chandari has a specific border design because it's called Naksha in Hindi. We call it Naksha. It's a border. So you look at the borders and then they when we call it Sui Dhaga and Tana and Bana. So they look at it. Now, if you look at it, it is the skill of the Ansaris. It is skill of the college that brings a distinct geographical identity, indication to Chandari. That is why it is GI pattern, GI reflected. So we got a GI, and for whom the patterns are made. See why? By the Dalits or by the marginalized Muslim community. Now, in that sense, there is a skill. Now, today's government what wants that develop that skill. Ensure that those skills are not lost. So the skill development so that they can earn a decent salary, decent income for them. And a decent income lead to decent education. Decent education lead to decent skills. Decent skill lead to decent employment, and decent employment, decent income. Now, once these are put together, it is relevant. And probably all these things can possible only once you ensure that there is justice, there is equality, there is a liberty. And for that you need to have a rule of law. So despite the government, whatever times it do or doesn't, there has to be existence of a democratic structure, there has to be existence of a rule of law, and then you look at these things. And therefore the challenge before SDG and otherwise, if we think of non-discrimination, we also along with that, we have to develop a international human right paradigm and international human right regime. And within that framework, we must localize those international agendas. Unless until localize it, which is called, in India signatory, for example, many documents in instruments of United Nations. But we have to bring that into the context of our state, in the context of one nation. And for that reason, we need to create necessary laws in India. And once you create a law, then you create a framework how you implement that law. Many times, like most South Asian countries, we have very good laws, but very poor implementation. So therefore, the need to people look at is that. But I think with SDG, what we have started, we have actually started to identifying an agenda. Number one, where the problem lies, that we have identified. Secondly, how to deal with it, that also we identified. The third, how to implement it effectively to create and harness a understanding, and create a structure where the people would be able to understand that, among themselves, and then they have to indoctrinate in the values of human rights, in the values of justice, in the values of equality. Because once it becomes indoctrinated and instilled among them, and it becomes the part of their life, then it becomes easy. But even now, what happens? It happens that we are imposing it. So the moment people think it's an imposition of it, there is opposition to it, and there is a conflict over ages, and most of our resources are spent on that way. So therefore, it is imperative that we think positively, we act sincerely, and we create necessary democratic structure to create awakening people, and then that will be possible to develop and ensure justice, equity, equality, and non-discrimination against all, and especially against the minorities. So I think I am limiting myself to the time. So other speakers are there. So it would be unfair on my part to use my privilege to being a past speaker and to ensure take time of others. So I would stop at it, and maybe on question and answer session somewhere we can discuss those things. So thank you for giving me a present hearing, and I am leaving. Now floor is yours, Heman. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tapan, for sharing your wealth of knowledge and shedding light on such critical aspect. Your expertise has enriched our discussion significantly. It was truly an honor to have you with us today. Thank you again, Dr. Mohanty. Now, moving ahead, I would like to invite our second speaker, Cynthia Stephen. Cynthia Stephen is not just a regular speaker, but she is an organic intellectual, deeply involved in grassroots initiatives, especially championing the cause of women in India, which is beyond the words. Her interests cover a wide spectrum, such as history, gender studies, language, religion, politics, and even earth and life sciences. And Cynthia, also a big thank you for joining us in a on such short notice. Your presence here is truly appreciated, and we are eagerly looking forward to what you are about to share with us. Now it's your turn to sport some light on this.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to have been invited to speak, and that's why, even though the notice was short, I was happy to accept, because I think it's important that we are all thinking together on such aspects. So the SDG number 10 is a very important one of the most important, I would say, because it is talking about the reduction of equality within and among countries. Now, often worth inequality is the flip side of economic growth. It need not be. What happens is there is a lot of economic growth, but it is not accompanied by human growth. And it need not be like that, because there can be policy interventions which make it possible for the benefits of economic growth to be spread out across the economic and social spectrum of the country. At this point, far too much wealth of the world is held by a very small group of people, and many of them are in very small sectors, and they belong to a set category, like they may be tech entrepreneurs, or they may be traders, or involved in finance, or they may have been part of traditional family businesses. So this pattern leads to social and financial discrimination and inequality in each. Its people need to flourish, and equality and progress must be open to all, regardless of race, religion, gender, and class or economic status. With this introduction, I would like to point out, I have divided my presentation into two sections. One is the introduction, the other is three, the introduction, and then a list of policy interventions that institutions and individuals can make, and also what individuals can also do to be a part of the problem. So it's addressed not only to the institutions and policy makers, but also to individuals, because reducing inequality is not only left the policy makers. You and I can also be a part of that situation. We have to reduce. We have to work on sustaining economic growth, income growth for the lowest 40% of the population, which is at a rate higher than the national average. Now, this is some of the targets that have been set for the countries to intervene successfully to reduce inequality. One is, that is the first one, by sustaining income growth for the lowest 40% of the population at a rate higher than the national average. There is an assumption that growth will be continuous, but the rate of growth of the poor should be faster than that of the national average. Then, promote universal social, economic, and political inclusion. Now, those are policy issues and can be addressed in this manner. So, they're talking about the need for equal opportunities, to give equal opportunities for all and end discrimination by eliminating laws, policies, and practices and which are discriminatory, and promote the laws, legislations, and policies to enable more activity. I will give one instance. In the olden days, we used to have, I'm talking about olden days because I'm from an earlier generation of women workers. And as a journalist, women journalists were never given the night shift because it was an issue sending them home, after their shift was over. Then after that, women journalists said, no, we need to be treated on par with others. We must have our night shift should also be there. What happens is, because they're not on night shift, their experience is not enough for them to be elevated. So that's a kind of structural discrimination which kept women at the lower levels of journalism. And so then once women started insisting on being included in night shifts, Then the companies had to start, the newspaper companies had to start arrangements to drop them back. So then a taxi service used to be there, the vehicle used to go and drop them in their houses and all that. So that in that way, that became later on became quite a norm. And as you know, the BPO, which works on global system, now uses taxi systems night and day. There are women working in BPOs, and laws have been brought in to make it safer for women to work in the night also. So these are the ways in which we can end the gender discrimination. For instance, for women in employment, and also the adopt laws which make it possible for women to participate in economic activities. Then adopt fiscal and social policies that promote equality, adopting wages and social policies. The point is that there are many wage differentials, and the schemes of the government do not take into account the real needs. So one of the examples I can give is that of late there has been an increase in certain state governments permitting the women transport without ticket. So a free ticket. It's not that they're without ticket, they're issued a ticket, but that ticket is reimbursed by the government to the transport corporation. So the government takes up the responsibility to pay the cost of the woman's ticket. This has given an opportunity for many women to become more mobile in terms of employment. Not only employment, even social mobility. You can say even in other ways, because if there's a woman, say, who lives far away from her parents' home and she is facing violence in the house, and she wants to go back, or she wants to take a break from the house and go to stay with her parents or relatives, the issue used to be that nobody is going to pay her ticket. Now that problem is not there. She can just take a bus and leave to her wherever, to be safe wherever. So this has been a very helpful process for women to increase women's mobility. So these kind of policies have promoted the equality and mobility women, and thereby also for who go to work using buses are saving a lot of money, and that money saved is being used for the family, for better education or food in the family. So in many ways it has helped. So this way this policy has really been helpful in many ways. In Karnataka it has happened. It was first initiated, I think, in Delhi, then later on initiated in Karnataka. In Tamil Nadu, in fact, as a matter of fact, Tamil Nadu was the first to introduce free bus travel for women. And so this has really empowered women in many ways. Then improved regulation of, now we are coming now not only from in-country policies, now we come to the international level. Improved regulation of global financial markets and institutions. See, the global financial markets are usually in the hands of the powerful. So now we are saying whatever institutions are there, democratize them, give the less powerful a greater voice. Then not only that, the regulation, once it is done, implementation of regulation also should be done better. Enhanced representation and voice for developing countries in global decision making for accountability and credible institutions. See, we now live in a globalized world, and policy making, it cannot be confined only to one country. Policies made in one country impact the incomes and livelihoods and health and safety of people in other countries. And the less developed countries have got more vulnerabilities. So therefore, the population tends to be higher. That is why we need to understand the need for democratizing not only the regulation at international level, but also the implementation of the policies to be more equitable and in favor of the less developing countries. Then another important one, that is migration, the rules which are related to migration. Human beings, some of them, they always have been a lot of migration across the world from prehistoric years. for economic reasons, people migrating has become quite prominent. And in the increasingly globalized economy, that is one of the big features. And so there are countries which accept migrants based on certain criteria. Some of them are very highly educated. Some may not be highly educated, but may also have other reasons to migrate. So for economic reasons, if they migrate, then they should be facilitative. The policies should facilitate the migration, and the policies should be fair and equitable and geared to the dignity of the human person. So this is an important way to maintain the regulate the inequality of the inequality in the countries. Then, where there are less developing countries, where the countries are developing at a lower rate, the least developed countries and the LDCs, we call them LDCs internationally, they should be special and differential treatment for developing countries and less developed countries. Then there should be not only that, so the differential treatment, there should be an encouragement of development assistance and investment in the LDCs. Otherwise, what will happen is that if there is no investment in the less developed countries, people will be forced to migrate for work, and then the societies in the less developed countries will become hollowed out. And so the younger generation will move. A lot of that demographic shift takes place due to immigration policies and migration policies. So that is very important to keep in mind. Then finally, the last point, reduce the transaction cost for migrant, remittances. While many economies, for instance, if you can think of Bangladesh, you can think of Sri Lanka and parts of India, there are the entire household economy runs on the remittance of the people who have gone abroad or who have migrated. May not have gone abroad, maybe they've migrated from Bihar to Kerala, or from Kerala they've come to Bangalore. And so the family support is run on the migrant population's financial support. So we need to be able to cut the cost of transactions so that migrants can easily support their families at a much lower cost of transaction. Now, this is as far as policies go. What can institutions and individuals do to improve the situation of inequality? Very quickly, individuals and institutions can make a difference. How? First, support charities which work with the minority communities, migrant communities, children, disabled. So any section which is facing discrimination, they always will have needs and will always have a requirement for charity activities. Let us become a part of that solution. Then work on rights and fight inequality. So you might, for instance, discover that women are being paid a very low rate, for instance, example, or disabled people are not allowed to look for employment in a particular industry, which they should be able to do. So we can fight and say that this is discriminatory. You should not discriminate against them, and we should argue with and promote a dialogue and enable the reduction of that inequality or discrimination. Oppose any form of discrimination, regardless of gender, race, sexual orientation, social class or marginalization, or physical ability or disability. Then run voter. This is very important. The citizenship engagement to end any discrimination. The participation of citizens is very, very important. So run voter registration campaigns, and then which is so important for representation, because when we're talking about democracy, we're talking about representation. And if people are not voting, that means they are not being there. For leadership is active. And so it's a need for representation and for power. This is very, very crucial. Then volunteer and dialogue with institutions working with the minorities or any the discriminatory.
Support struggling minority community in your areas.
We have people who have migrated from Burma. They have come and they are there. So there are people who go and reach out to them. So like that, there are migrant communities which are struggling and they don't know the language, they don't know anything. Somehow they've landed off in Bangalore and so they're struggling. So there are like that. There are similarly, you must be having migrants in every country, in every city there are. Favor companies which have policies working on inclusion. Inclusive policy making has shown to be very conducive to long-term development and growth of the any company. They have done long-term longitudinal studies which have proved that companies which are more diverse in their hiring policies have lasted very long compared to companies which are very, very restrictive in their hiring policies. And then lastly, stay informed and engaged on the issues of any of the vulnerable communities. Choose what you want to do. You want to work for the disabled, you want to work for the migrants, you want to work for people from marginalized Dalit communities, you want to work with women. Choose one or two and then get involved and stay engaged and become a part of the problem rather than become a part of the solution rather than be a part of the problem. With these words, I want to close and thank you all for a patient listen.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. There you have it, insights, wisdom, and a whole lot ponder from Cynthia Stephen. Thank you very much for gracing us with your knowledge and patience. Your words have left us inspired and eager for the more. Now, let me introduce our last speaker, Mr. Abhay Kumar, a PhD candidate at the Center of Historical Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Mr. Kumar have dwelled into the theme of Indian Muslims and social justice, contributing regularly to newspapers and news portals. His unique perspectives and independent journalist and researcher aids a valuable dimension to our conversation on reducing inequality and promoting social justice. Mr. Kumar, your work on the broader theme of Indian Muslim and social justice, coupled with the experience of journalist and brings a real world perspective to our discussion. We are eager to hear your thoughts on how SDG-10 can play a role in addressing the challenges faced by minority communities in India and beyond. Over to you for your invaluable insights and wisdom.
Thank you very much, Heman Das and South Asian Research Institute for Minorities. I thank you for giving me another opportunity to speak at your platform. Friends, today's topic is Global Agenda for Reduce Equality with reference to Sustainable Development Goal 10. If you look at the policy program of Sustainable Development Goal 10, it says that it is committed to reducing inequality among countries and within countries. And it has also been claimed that the targets would be achieved by 2030. And in the policy program, it has been argued that inequality based on income, sex, age, disability, sexual orientation, race, class, ethnicity, religion, opportunity continue to persist across the world, and the inequality persists within and among the countries. So the most fundamental feature of this policy analysis is the recognition of the fact that market-based economy cannot do justice to people, because in society inequality is largely there, but it is depoliticized, and to argue that everybody in market is equal, they all carry rights and they are all equal, they are placed in a same situation. That is not true. And I think Sustainable Development Goal 10 and its policy makers should be congratulated that the scholars who have been talking about inequality persisting in society, I think their viewpoints have been officially recognized. When I say that minority is being discriminated, my understanding of minority is not based on religion only. And I think South Asian Research Institute for Minorities would also agree with me that the idea of minority is not fixed. People from one religion becomes majority in one region, and the person from another religion becomes minority in another religion. For example, in India, Muslims are in minority, but in Pakistan, Hindus and Christians and Sikhs, they are in minority. So no religious community can be called that they are minority in all circumstances. Similarly, no religious community in majority in all situations. So the proper way to define minority is not one's religious identity, but how the particular community is given power, how much that community is disempowered, how much that community is having access to resources, how much a particular community is being suppressed and oppressed. And we will find that people across country, they belonging to different identities, they are all suppressed. So when we talk about minorities and their rights, in fact we are strengthening democracy, because it is not an agenda against Hindus or against Muslims or against Christian, but this is an agenda to empower the most vulnerable in any particular society. So those who look at minority politics, minority research as if that these policies are there to weaken society or weaken the nation state, I think they are misplaced. And similarly, the way the UN and the policy makers of Sustainable Goal 10 have recognized the fact that market-based development, neoliberal policy, and the desire to achieve only growth without looking into the other aspects, the dark side of the growth, that is how exclusion is happening, how environmental degradation is happening, how people from the marginalized communities are left out in this whole process of development. I think this is very welcome move, but just to make policy and just to announce any program is not enough. It may be very important that the United Nations and world agencies have recognized the fact that discrimination is happening, and discrimination is happening on multiple grounds including religion. There is a need to take concrete actions and to translate those visions into action. So in Sustainable Development Goal 10, it has been mentioned that sustainable development cannot be achieved without including people, and here peoples also include minorities. And even in the policy program, it has been mentioned that children's, I think millions of children's, they are dying, and they are dying of the disease which could be prevented if more and more budget, more and more money is spent on social sectors, particularly on health. And it is very unfortunate that the sufferers, the victims of the development policies are largely the people who are from developing countries, and they are definitely from in large number from the regions of the South Asia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, where this institute is located. And we all we all come from different regions of the South Asia. So our responsibility is more to take up this issue, and it is very important that we should talk about not only inequality among the nations but also inequality among within the nation also. In 1960s and 70s, I think there was a debate that the rich countries, the north, the metropolis are discriminating, exploiting the south. While this is true, but in that debate the exploitation within the country was not much highlighted, and it is welcome move that inequality within the country is also stressed and it is also underscored. I am speaking from New Delhi, and I know mostly about the situations in India. So let me talk about how the conditions of minorities are in this part of the region, and by giving their socio and economic backwardness, my argument would be, or my submission would be, that international agencies and also the government of India should take up the questions of minorities seriously, and it should not only be reduced to symbolism and lip service. In 2018, our Prime Minister, India's Prime Minister, Sri Narendra Modi, has made a speech, and he said that in 2018 that he would like to see Indian youth having the Holy Quran in one hand and the computer in another hand. So basically, he made a promise that the rise of the BJP and the rise of the Narendra Modi is not against the welfare of the minority community as the opposition party might argue, but in fact he is here to protect the religious minorities and their identity, as well as he is committed to welfare of the minorities, and he has given the slogan that sabka vikas and sabka sath, that he is seeking cooperation of all and he is committed to welfare of all. But in actual politics, what is happening, that minorities are not treated equally in India, despite the fact that India is one of the largest democracy. India has got a secular and inclusive constitution where minority rights are enshrined in the constitution, and they are part of the fundamental rights of the Indian constitution, which cannot be taken away. These rights are inalienable. And in India, social movements, civil society movements are very strong, and people from the religious communities have reached the top positions. They are there in media, they are there in judiciary, they are there in parliament, but their proportions are not satisfactory. And as Baba Sahib Ambedkar has said, that there is a need to achieve both proportional as well as effective representation for minority. So my argument is, my contestation is, that despite the fact that there has been a policy that by 2030 the Sustainable Development Goal 10 would elevate inequality based on race, caste, religion, sex, and it will provide equal platform for everybody, including religious minority. And the document has said that it must work for removing religious intolerance. But it is very unfortunate that both in India and at international level, I think and I feel and I perceive that religious intolerance, instead of dying down, it is on the rise. And this should be a big concern for everybody, including researchers and activists. Friends, let me give a few examples from India and say that our policies makers must take up the issues of the welfare of religious minority very seriously. In India, minorities, when I say minorities, minority include religious minority like Muslims, Christians, Sikh, Buddhist, Parsi, and also if you take the Baba Sahib Ambedkar's, B.R. Ambedkar's understanding of minority, which includes also those who are socially discriminated, then we could also include Adivasi, which officially are called the scheduled tribes, and also the Dalits, the ex-untouchables, which are officially called in India scheduled caste. So scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, lower caste, women, sexually discriminated community. So if you include all of them, I think they are all minorities and they are today not given equal rights, despite the fact that our politicians have made such promises and our constitutions have asked a state not to discriminate anybody based on caste, sex, gender, religion. So what is happening that in India, and let me limit myself to the situations of Indian Muslims, which is the largest minority in India. Indian Muslim is facing poverty. Indian Muslim is facing exclusion as far as public institutions are concerned, and youths particularly are highly discriminated and excluded from both higher education and public employment. So what is happening unfortunately in India, that there is a rise of vegetarianism, and unfortunately, despite having a secular constitution, I think anti-minority agenda is being pursued by the majoritarian party to win elections, and there has been consistent cut on the budget on social welfare, including the schemes on the minority. And the most shocking is that the minority community is being demonized, and by creating a binary between the majority and minority, the vested interest is pursuing their interest in power and they are holding on to power. So these are very, very unfortunate developments which are happening in India. But at the same time, let me also assure my friends in Pakistan and other parts of South Asia that in India, Indian Muslims and minority communities are fighting their battle, and they are in alliance with all those who are marginalized and those who believe in social justice and minority rights. They are fighting, and there is a need to wage a battle against all kinds of inequality. And let's fight our battle democratically, peacefully, and let's extend our solidarity to all those across the globe who are fighting for their rights and their dignity. Thank you very much. This is what I have to say from New Delhi. I once again thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thanks a lot.
It was pleasure hearing you, Mr. Kumar, and thank you very much for sharing your valuable contribution to our dialogue on reducing inequality and promoting social justice. Now, moving ahead, I'm thrilled to introduce Rimsha Shahid for concluding remarks. She is the powerhouse senior research analyst at SARIM, driving our mission for minority rights in South Asia. Over to you, Rimsha.
In concluding our webinar, which is the Global Agenda for Reduced Inequality, SDG-10 and its significance in alleviating discrimination against minorities, I want to express my sincere appreciation to our speakers and participants for making today's discussion so impactful. We have delved into the practicalities of SDG-10, exploring how its principles translate into tangible actions for minority communities specifically, from insightful talks on policy interventions that reduce discrimination to success stories illustrating how inclusivity can be integrated into various sectors. Our conversations have been both enlightening and actionable. The takeaway from today's dialogues is clear. The implementation of SDG-10 is not just an abstract goal, but a real world catalyst for change. We have seen and heard about projects that have made a difference on the ground and strategies that have effectively bridged gaps in reducing inequality. Our first speaker, Professor Tapan Mohanty, discussed work conditions in South Asian region and in other parts of the world concerning minorities, whether they are caste or religious minorities. Specifically addressing India, there exists a broad spectrum of minorities in the country who are subjected to various forms of discrimination. He opined that diversity is deemed crucial in accepting other minorities and supporting them in their cultural and religious practices. Economic and sociological distinctions, whether Asian, American, or Chinese, are pervasive, reflecting a mentality that exists globally. Professor Tapan also emphasized that the right to education is equal for Black and white children alike. There is no distinction as well, right? In alignment with the doctrine of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is also known as the UDHR, the international law, and the Agenda 2030 of the United Nations to reduce inequalities. Addressing these issues is imperative, as the coexistence of minority and majority population within a state is essential for the survival of democracy. In last, he said that justice, equality, and liberty can only be achieved through the rule of law. Moving ahead, Ms. Cynthia Stephen highlighted that SDG-10 is one of the crucial global goals covering economic, social, political, racial, and religious inequality. She thoroughly discussed policy interventions and the significance of grassroots individuals in development to reduce inequality. India is focusing on two areas. The first one is economic empowerment, and the other one is to eliminate discriminatory practices by providing equal opportunities in mainstream domains. For that particular reason, various laws and policies have been introduced aiming to provide equal opportunities to women and economically disadvantaged individuals, which is quite appreciative, I guess. At the international level, measures are being considered to involve developing countries in global policy making, ensuring equal representation of every country in an intervention. Emphasizing migration issues, she expressed the opinion that if individual due to a specific issue migrate to another country, other countries should facilitate them covering all the domains. Additionally, she suggested that the countries must reduce transaction costs to encourage increased migrant remittances through proper legal channels, as it also includes a greater contribution to the country's GDP. In conclusion, she highlighted the importance of people's participation and representation in achieving social development. Dialogues related to minority rights advocacy are very crucial, and inclusive policy making can ensure the long-term sustainability of societies. And moving ahead, last but certainly not least, Dr. Abhay Kumar shed light on the targets and indicators of SDG-10, which focuses on reducing inequality in all its forms, encompassing race, religion, economic distinctions, educational differences, and political discriminations. Sorry. He emphasized that discrimination against minorities is not limited to religious minorities alone. The idea of minority extends to how much power a particular community is given, and the extent to which they are suppressed in various ways. Dr. Abhay also expressed appreciation for the creators of SDGs. However, he expressed that merely formulating policies is insufficient. Accountability is crucial to assess the actual achievement of goals. This involves monitoring access to basic rights such as employment, healthcare, and other essential lifeline functions to ensure the real impact of the goals. As almost 8 years of SDGs in the lane, minorities are still suffering, specifically in India, be it women, caste minorities like Dalit and Adivasis, and religious minorities like Muslims and Christians. But Dr. Abhay Kumar, it's good to know that people are fighting for their rights in India. It's always appreciated to know this. So yes, as we wrap up, let's carry these concrete discussions into our spheres of influence. Let's be advocates who not only understand the issues but actively contribute to solutions. Together, we surely can turn our ideas into actions, making a lasting impact on reducing inequality and discrimination against minorities. Thank you all for your engaged participation, and we look forward to seeing the positive outcomes that will undoubtedly stem from today's conversation. Thanks again. Over to you, Heman.
Uh, Thank you so much, Rimsha. It was a truly pleasure hearing your concluded remarks on today's agenda. As we sign off this webinar, let's carry the torch of knowledge and inspiration forward. A heartfelt thank you to our distinguished speaker, Dr. Tapan Mohanty, Cynthia Stephen, Dr. Abhay Kumar, and Rimsha Shahid for sharing their perspectives. Your engagement has made this discussion impactful. Until our virtual path grows again, stay informed, stay inspired, and keep championing the cause of reduced inequality. Thank you again for all for being the part of this meaningful webinar.